will be to permit it to become a tangle of squabbling nationalities, an intricate knot of German Americans, Irish Americans. There's no such thing as a hyphenated American who is a good American. The only man who is a good American is a man who is American and nothing else. Roosevelt implied in these remarks that the Germans and Irish, in particular, had some sort of extraterritorial loyalty. He and his whole class, however, had no difficulty in identifying with and showing loyalty for the war aims of Great Britain. Perhaps the seminal moment in the war against German culture was August 5th, 1914, when the British cut the transatlantic cables from Germany to the U.S. The purpose of this act was to prevent the German side from being heard in the American press, to prevent articles showing the German war effort in a positive way from reaching the American public. All European news was now filtered through British censors. Only German news dispatches brought in by ship or submarine ever reached the American press. The English-language press ignored these as German propaganda. Incidentally, another question for you. What language was the largest number of newspapers in the United States printed in 1914? There were more German language newspapers in the United States in 1914 than there were English. Good reason, because the average educational level and literacy of the German American population was higher than that of the Anglo-American population, many of whom were rural farmers. So World War I progressed with only British propaganda being available to the American people. Germans went from being Saxon brothers to being Asiatic Huns overnight. Lies were told about rape and child murders committed by German soldiers in Belgium, about German plants that turned corpses of murdered Belgians into soap and other products for German use. Germans in Canada were terrorized. The town of Berlin was forced to change its name to Kitchener, still is called Kitchener to this day. A concentration camp was set up on the Isle of Man, which held over 100,000 German British civilians, including relatives of mine. Incidentally, when was the first concentration camp invented and by whom? One of the students in the back, maybe. Do you know where the first concentration camp was? In South Africa by the English to break the will of the Boers. Second use on a large scale of concentration camps was the Isle of Man. Every German, every Austrian on the British islands was incarcerated on the Isle of Man for the duration of the First World War. Although they controlled most news from Europe, the British could not control the flood of news that resulted from the armed rebellion in Ireland during Easter week 1916. The brutality with which the British put down the rebellion horrified Irish Americans and many Anglo-Americans as well, and came close to causing the U.S. To enter World War I on the side of Germany. The execution of the leaders of the rebellion, seen by many Americans as the founding fathers of a free Ireland, further burdened U.S. relations with the British Empire. It is interesting to note that there were no rebellions in the German Empire during World War I or in the Austrian Empire. Its citizens of whatever ethnicity supported the country which had granted universal adult male suffrage before Great Britain and had had the first social security insurance system in the world. They had reason to support the government. But aside from the eye-opening caused by the Easter Rising, Britain and France continued to control the flow of news, and American sympathies slowly were molded in their behalf. Since the British and French navies controlled the seas, trade with Germany dried up, and huge arms sales were made to the Western Allies, giving an economic reason for pro-Allied sympathies. Stockpiles of weapons and ammunition piled up on Black Tom Island in New York Bay. On the night of July 30th, 1916, 2 million pounds of ammunition, which were being stored in the depot and freight cars for transportation to Great Britain and France to kill German soldiers were blown up by German-American agents. This soured relationships with Germany, obviously, because it was a tremendous economic loss to the companies that had produced the ammunition and TNT. Germany declared unlimited submarine warfare against all ships heading for Allied ports. American ships, however, continued to travel to these ports. In the most famous case, German intelligence officers were informed by Irish and German-American dock workers that the Lusitania was carrying war materials destined for Allied armies. Indeed, her manifest stated that her cargo included an estimated 4,200,000 rounds of rifle cartridges. The German embassy did what it could, warning American citizens and other neutrals not to travel on the Lusitania. When the Lusitania was sunk off the coast of Ireland, where a first explosion caused by a German torpedo did not sink the ship, but a second explosion, believed by many to have been caused by the ammunition on board, caused the ship to sink with great loss of life. As we know, the U.S. entered World War I against Germany and Austria-Hungary in 1917. As a result of American resources and our fresh troops, the tide of battle turned against Germany, and the war ended with Allied victory. To ensure agreement to any terms the Allies wanted, the blockade of food on Germany and against Austria as well was continued. And as Dr. Vesselis pointed out earlier, people actually dropped dead walking on the streets in Vienna as a result of the extreme lack of caloric intake that they had. To this day, you can see old people that were born during this period with terrible back problems because they did not receive the required calcium that they needed. This was to enforce German willingness to accept any terms. The impact of World War I on German Americans was huge. The KKK became actively anti-German, burning crosses on the lawns of many German Americans. German newspapers were closed. Speaking German in public or educating your children in German language schools became illegal. Many were tarred and feathered for alleged disloyalty to the United States. Robert Prager, a socialist German immigrant living in the area of St. Louis, was lynched in Collinsville, Illinois. Do you know where Collinsville, Illinois is? After an anti-German mob gained entrance to a jail where he was being held and found Prager hiding in the basement, the police stood aside as the mob marched him to beyond city limits. After allowing Prager to write a brief letter to his parents in Germany and pray, he was hanged in front of a crowd of 200 people. The Collinsville Herald editor and publisher, J.O. Monroe, said that, and I quote, "Outside a few persons who may still honor a harbor Germanic inclinations, the whole city is glad that the 11 men indicted for hanging Prager were acquitted." Monroe noted, "The community is well convinced that he was disloyal. The city does not miss him. The lesson of his death has had a wholesome effect on the Germanists of Collinsville and the rest of the nation." He praised the lynching of a man who had never been convicted of anything. German-American author Kurt Vonnegut described the losses suffered by German Americans. The anti-German feeling so shamed Kurt's parents' generation, he noted, that they resolved to raise his generation without acquainting me with the language or the literature or the music or the oral family histories which my ancestors had loved. They volunteered to make me ignorant and ruthless as proof of their patriotism. As he put it, he lost Europe, and so did most German Americans of his generation. The post-World War I peace, which was supposed to ensure no territorial changes without the expressed desire of the populations involved, and which was the promise which led